Welcome back to the show. Today I have a very special guest. Her name is Madeline Miller. And Madeline and I met just a couple of months ago, but I had the opportunity of working with her for 4 weeks during Innovation Incubator last year. She has the most beautiful heart to serve. And I'm just so grateful that I got to see what her business is all about. In the 4 weeks that we worked together, Madeline actually wrote a book. It was a project that was very strong on her heart. She wanted to get this out into the world. It is called the Redefining Success, the Burnout-Free Formula for Influence and Impact. And today, I'd love to ask you a couple questions about your book, Madeline, and hear more about your story. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
So happy to have you here. Can you tell me more about what you do? Like, how would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I always like to start with the fact that I'm a former entertainment attorney, just because it sort of shows that you can make large pivots in your life that are driven by purpose, even when it looks like you might have like a really cool job and successful career. So I was an entertainment attorney for many years, and from Australia, but I live in LA and I've been here 10 years now. But in 2021, I started doing some individual coaching because a friend of mine on career and leadership, because a friend of mine suggested that I might be good at it. And I sort of I took a client on and realized that it really sort of married up the things that I enjoy most, which is sort of taking ideas and taking other people's ideas and frameworks and synthesizing them in ways that can be really impactful for other people. It also allowed me to sort of process a lot of my own work experience and sort of dive in a little bit to my own journey and background and search for sort of purpose and meaning. And so in 2024, I turned that into a full-time platform slash program. I became an entrepreneur. I became a content creator. I am creating, we can go into that later, but these online resources. So my whole goal was to make the executive coaching world more accessible for the next generation of leaders. So focusing on Gen Z and millennials who otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity for that kind of coaching.
Wow. What an impact for the next generation. I love how future focused you are with your work. I can see that you notice this generation needing coaching, needing help, needing guidance. And you're taking so many areas of your skill set, your expertise, and combining it into a very digestible format. And that's what I found you to be absolutely exceptional with. You are an amazing teacher, amazing coach, and you take concepts and simplify them. So I'm so curious. I've actually never asked you this before, but why
Yeah.
Gen Z and millennial?
Well, I mean, a couple of reasons. I mean, mainly because it was that period of my life, like my 20s and maybe my early 30s, where I was really struggling. So I wanted to connect with the people that were like me, I guess is the shortest way of answering. Um, you know, in addition to that, I had a couple of clients come in that were sort of sponsored by their work. They found me and they were younger, mainly women. And I really landed with them. I really enjoyed working with them. I could tell that they enjoyed working with me. So I realized that that was a sort of sweet spot for me. Um,
Mhm.
and then I sort of thought too, well, I did a bit more research into it. And, you look at the shifting work landscape, like in the generations that are making up the workplace now, and the largest proportion of those in 2025 are obviously going to be Gen Z and millennials. So they're going to really radically shift the way we work. And I think that given the situation in which a lot of them entered the workforce, particularly Gen Z, sort of they finished their university or college during COVID online, they've perhaps started online, the way we work is shifting. And so a lot of the skills that you might otherwise develop from in place work environments, they're not developing. And that's backed up by the
Mm.
data. That's not just my opinion. So I really saw there was, an unmet need, and it really felt like the most natural spot for me to fill.
That is very wise. When we first start a business, it is often hard to find out where is our new opportunity, our unique purpose that we were put on this earth to fulfill. But yet at the same time, where is there a gap in the marketplace? Like, where is there something that you can fulfill? And I love that you found that. I can
Yeah.
see that the way that you work, you are so enthusiastic for the success of your clients. And that's why you've noticed that burnout is a very, very common topic. Tell me more. Why did you choose burnout as the topic of your book?
Originally, it wasn't. Originally, I was sort of coming, as you know, we were
Yes.
looking at like certain pain points. And as I sifted through all the different pain points people feel, like difficulties with their boss, difficult finding their purpose, finding a career that fits, difficulties with colleagues, a whole range of things, or difficult with communication, the outcome was that it would lead to disengagement, lack of motivation, emotional outbursts, depression, anxiety, all things that are a sign of burnout. So I realized that there's a whole bunch of pain points within the workplace, but the end result in the negative end result, if they go unmanaged or unchecked, is burnout. And I kind of got that data from a lot of the interaction I was getting online. So I've done quite well on LinkedIn since
Mhm.
joining LinkedIn, not joining LinkedIn, but since posting on LinkedIn about 6 months ago, I've got almost 60,000 followers, right? So like whatever I was doing was landing on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
And so I really like interrogated the comments that were being left on my posts. I did a couple of little surveys. I reached out to people
Mhm.
individually to really try and get a sense of what their pain points were. And like I said, all roads sort of led back to burnout. So that was the umbrella to deal with a whole range of other workplace issues.
It's interesting how all roads kind of led to Rome. All
Right,
roads led to this point of
right.
people being burned out because they really wanted to have this massive career success. They wanted to get the promotions. They wanted to have the dream life. But it's almost like they thought burnout was necessary to get there.
That's right.
And I
That's right.
think your story has points like that as well. Like you reached points in your journey, not only in entrepreneurship, but before you became an entrepreneur, where you were burnt out. Can you tell us a bit more about those stories?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's interesting, like what you said, and I'll relate this back to me in a minute. There's also a lot of data around Gen Z experiencing burnout, which sort of seems
Interesting.
counterintuitive, right? Because you're like, well,
Yeah.
they've just started. How can they be burnt out? And I'm sure a lot of people might be dismissive of that. But burnout is, it stems from a lot of different things. It's not just overwork. It can also come from not feeling like you have a sense of purpose in the work you're doing, or not feeling like your work is aligned. And so that really was how I felt. So for the first part of my career, I wasn't working too hard. I just wasn't really working in anything that felt right to me. And I
Mm.
was very, very frustrated and very, very worried about that. And so the way that impacted me was like I developed insomnia, I jumped from job to job. I never really followed through on things. So I would say I was ambitious and I was educated, like I had the college degree, but I was unfocused. And so when I wanted, my solution was then to go to law school, really because that would give me a purpose, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, I can say I'm a lawyer and it's a field, like it's clear. I don't need to explain it.
Mhm.
But I found, like that's just a short-term solution to a
Mhm.
deeper problem. So I did go to law school, and then my first 5 years as a lawyer, I jumped to like five different jobs, right? I
Wow.
landed in entertainment law because it felt like the best synergy of things I was interested in. And, like I didn't hate it all. Like I moved to the US, I did a master's in it. Like I wanted to work in Hollywood and I did that. And along the way, I really did get a sense of satisfaction from achieving things and learning things. So it's not all bad, but there was always a niggling sense that this wasn't quite it. And I think
Mhm.
how that then manifested itself in my first real entertainment law job in Hollywood that was when I got the more sort of, I guess, traditional markers of burnout, because I was worked very hard. There was no support. Like, a whole sort of organizational culture that was not super healthy. And we suddenly were like in go mode, and I was doing work I had no real ability to do and expected to perform. So that was when, I mean, in hindsight, and I go into this in my book, as you mentioned, that was when I guess that's when it all kind of culminated. My unhealthy relationship with work really culminated because I was, as I say, being worked to the bone, but I was allowing myself to be worked to the bone. And that was a big distinction for me. Yeah.
Interesting. What you allow in order to gain the clarity of where you're meant to be.
Right. And I think that's super common. Like, I think burnout, it's definitely structural, right? Like
Hmm.
expectations of the workplace, but it's also individual because
Yeah.
if you have defined your entire identity based on your job, or if you are driven by external validation and a whole range of other things, you will allow yourself, you will lose that perspective, that balance.
Hmm.
You may engage in work that is increasingly less meaningful to you, but increasingly more demanding of your time. And people can
Yeah.
do that. I mean, people can do that their entire career, or they can
Hmm.
do it for decades, right? Before
Hmm.
they hit a burning point. I think a
Yeah.
turning point with the burnout, though, if I could
Yeah.
just
Tell me.
add a little anecdote,
Yeah.
was when I think I told you this, like, so a lot of my work has been with like targeted at younger people, but a lot of the people that interact with me online through LinkedIn are not young. Like, well, sorry, they're young, but they're not necessarily in my demographic. So I was
Mm.
like, oh, okay, this is resonating with everyone. And then I had a man, and I don't exclusively coach women. I skews more female, but not exclusively. But I had
Mhm.
a man reach out who was a partner at a huge one of the big four, like KPMG, like a huge, huge director of finance, right? Like very big role, like very wealthy, very successful.
Yeah.
And he just saw a video of mine on burnout and was, for whatever reason, it really resonated. He called me and we had this call together, and he was almost kind of like panicked, and he was
Mm.
obviously quite confused. And he said to me, I have been a high achiever all my life, and I'm very successful, and I don't actually know what it's all for. And I was like, okay,
Mm.
like
Wow.
that is what we want to prevent. Like,
Yes.
we don't want to stop people being like, we don't want to stop high achievement, but we want to stop people getting to that point, because that was impacting his
Mm.
family life, his work life,
Mhm.
his mental health, so the ramifications are huge.
Yeah. Wow. And now you get to help younger generations prevent that. So,
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. So, not only you're working with people like him who are already in this place, but you're preventing it. Now, what
Yeah.
I'm sure that people are wondering here is what I'm wondering too is can you even be ambitious without being burned out? Like, don't they
That
go
is
hand in hand?
That is a great question. And I think I do also go into this in the book, because
Mhm.
I think that striving for excellence is important. I think, we have Maslow has a hierarchy of needs, psychological needs, and at the
Yeah.
bottom are like food, shelter, security, safety. And as we go, love, relationships, connection. At the very, very, very top of that, like the pinnacle of our psychological development, is self-actualization, right? So self-actualization is the idea that we have achieved everything we wanted to achieve to feel whole, right? Now, we may never achieve that, but we're always working towards it. So I think that ambition and excellence are part of the human condition, the desire for that. But where burnout starts to sort of deviate from that is that when your entire identity becomes enmeshed with who you are at work, or your kind of, like how much money you have, or how, what your title is, thing, and you don't feel happy, you don't
Yeah.
feel good, you're unable to set healthy boundaries, you're unable to emotionally regulate, so you're unbalanced or imbalanced,
Hmm.
and it starts eroding the quality of your life. So
Ah,
yeah, so it's not about never being busy. It's not about never having stress, but it's about how you learn to integrate that stress into your life.
I
And
see.
without my argument is, without doing the foundational work,
Yeah.
you are less able to, right?
So it's people who they have this massive dream. They have this goal in mind. And entrepreneurs listening to this, I'm sure they can relate too. It's not
Yeah.
just for executives, but they have this big goal and they think that because society tells us we have to work 14-hour days, we have to do like this long list of things to get there.
Be
That's the
partner by
only way.
30. Yeah,
Yeah.
they set these external goals that are not really internal. Like, oh, I have to be, just for example, like partner by 30, or I have to make
Yeah.
this much money by this age, or I have to be promoted to that thing. But like, and it's like, but why? Like, it's not like
Yeah.
you can never do that, but what's driving you? Are you
Mm.
happy? Have you really, like, do you have a healthy level of self-acceptance? Are you doing
Mhm.
something that you like? If you're constantly striving towards goals that feel designed for other people's approval, I would say that they are not genuine goals.
Mhm. 100%. And was there a turning point in your own career where you realized, why am I even doing this? And discovered what is your, actually realize that point of clarity. Why are you doing what you're doing? Was there a point like that for you?
So, I mean, there was a couple of pivotal moments, feelings I had that when I was in the peak of my work slash burnout period, where I could almost look in on myself and be like, what is going on? Like, you are sick, you are snappy, you don't like yourself, you're getting feedback that you're snappy and irritable. Yeah, you're working a lot and being kind of not acknowledged in a like not like given a promotion necessarily, but like people know that you work hard and you do a good job. And so you get these little, I guess, crumbs of acknowledgement, which you grab, right? Because you're desperate to sort of feel good about yourself. But in the process, you don't like who you're being. And my work life balance was non-existent. Like I wasn't enjoying my
Mm,
life. So it was like, okay, like I'm not saving lives. I'm not incredibly wealthy, right? Like what is this all for? Who am I trying to prove something to, right?
mhm.
So it was sort of a couple of incidents which I go into my book, right? Where it was really like sort of started to sift through. And then I think when the that intense period died down, I had the confidence to sort of advocate and get an even better job. And I became the production attorney for the James Bond franchise, which was like amazing, right? Like I'd hit sort
Yeah,
of the zenith of
yeah.
like, I'm an entertainment lawyer for like the biggest franchise or one of the biggest franchises in the world. And I was traveling a lot. You know, I was in like Jamaica and
Mm,
England and France. Like it was cool. But even then, after a couple of years, I was like, okay, like I'm happy in the ways that I wasn't happy before, but I'm
yeah.
not fulfilled. There's something missing. And that to me, it was almost like when I'm out of crisis mode and I'm out of
Mhm.
survival mode and things are, I think optically things are good, but I'm still feeling like something's missing. That was really the sign that I needed to do some more work to work it out.
That makes so much sense. So you're basically distinguishing between being fulfilled, being happy. What would you say is the difference there? How would you describe it?
I think that's a good question. I think you can be content. Like, I mean, these are all just my definitions, right? Like
Oh, I want to hear
happy versus,
yours.
yeah, happy versus content. Like you can be happy in your life or content, right? Like
Mhm.
you could have a nice relationship. You could be making enough money to do well. You could, you don't have to be suffering
Yeah.
just to, so you can be happy is what like you can have tick the boxes and be like, I'm okay. But I think being fulfilled, and I get this a lot when I have potential, like I have new client calls. This is very common. A lot of
Mm,
successful people come to me and they're not necessarily unhappy with everything, right? A lot of people in Silicon Valley, et cetera, et cetera. But they say to me, I just feel like I'm not, like I'm very ambitious. I just don't think I'm living up to my potential, or I just don't feel I'm doing truly what I want to do or what I can do. And that's how I felt.
I
I was like,
see.
I am not, I am not doing what I really, I think you had a guest on recently talking about Zone of Genius, right? I've read that book.
Did.
That's
Yes,
a great book.
Haley. Haley
And it's
Henderson.
like you feel fulfilled
Mhm.
if you can work in your zone of genius. And your people that are not working in their zone of genius may have very good jobs and very successful careers, right? It's not
Mhm.
doesn't all those things don't have to be falling apart, but there's just
Yeah.
something they're not doing, right? So
Yes. Yes. And I love that you bring up your zone of genius because the crazy thing about working in your zone of genius is it's actually energy giving. Like you
yes.
end up being fulfilled and refreshed by that work, even though from a metrics perspective, you're working the same amount of hours, maybe even more.
More even
Yeah,
sometimes.
more.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like when
Yeah.
you were writing this book, you went through
Yeah.
that process of, okay, writing is a zone of genius for you. And communicating these ideas was a zone of genius.
Yeah.
So tell me more about that process. What was your creative process there that helped you feel fulfilled and not burnt out by the massive project of writing this book in 4 weeks?
Well, I mean, working with you helped. I think having that accountability and that structure and support did really help. So I think,
Glad.
one thing I can sort of say, like investing in the things and people that can support you is very important, which is why I think coaching is important.
Yeah.
So I think, that was an important thing for me to sort of set up that container to work in and provide that structure. I needed
Mm,
the structure. Um, But what kept me going was this sense that nobody, like, if I didn't do that book, the world didn't care, right? Like,
Yeah.
no one's like, oh, Madeline's book didn't come out. Like, I told a few people, it wasn't a big secret, but it's not like it was completely self-driven. And, there's some interesting research on flow state, like when you're in flow, about being in flow. And they've done studies of the brain and the prefrontal cortex when you're in flow state has decreased activity, and the prefrontal cortex is the logical, reasoning, analytical, and it's also the bit that is thinking, about other people, and it's basically our inner critic. So it can be very helpful, right? It assesses and provides logic and analysis. But when it's decreased, you're relaxed, like you're focused. Like that's what being in flow is. So when I was doing that work, sometimes I got out of flow, and sometimes it's harder to get into flow, but I felt like I was in flow, and it felt incredibly rewarding because I wasn't doing it for anyone else. I
Yeah.
was just doing it for me. I had an end goal, which was that I wanted it to reach people that could that help it, but the process was really just all about me, and that was
Mm.
that was amazing. I'd never had that before, because when you work for other people, no matter how much you might like your job, and many people like their jobs, the outcome is not just for you. And I personally, and a lot of probably entrepreneurs feel this way, I wanted something that was just for me.
Yeah. Something you went all in on that provided deep value, working in your unique purpose that made you
Mm,
feel fulfilled and energized at the end of it.
exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
I love that. Love that so much. And the reason why that I think can be so hope-filled for executives, for entrepreneurs, for anyone who has a dream is because there really is a way. Like you
Mm,
have these formulas in your book, you have ways to tap into what do you really want?
mm.
Tap into your why. Tell me more about those. I know you have one specific formula. If 100% if you'd rather people just read the book, but if you could give us like a short summary of possibly the air formula, that would be, I think,
Yeah,
very
yeah, of
helpful.
course. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
how
as
that
you said,
connects.
yeah, I have a formula, the AIR formula, and it
Uh-huh.
stands for alignment, influence, and resilience. And it's based on the premise that everything we do needs to stem from our optimal alignment. And that's alignment between values, with your goals, your personal brand, your characteristics, attributes, the work environment you like, the type of work that gets the best out of you, all of these things. And that's what we go through. I go through more in the book and then in my coaching program. So it's like, how do
Mhm.
you work out alignment, right? And then from that place of strong alignment, it's kind of like laying the foundation to build a house, right? These are the bricks, the solid foundation upon which you can grow and develop into whatever you want. So from that basis, that's how I then say you can positively influence and lead, right? So the air,
Mm.
so it's alignment, influence, resilience. So then we look at, okay, like, how are you communicating? How are you communicating your value, and how are you showing your value in the way you communicate with people? And not just how you communicate daily or at work, it's particularly how are you communicating that value and that alignment when you're under pressure. So when stakes are high, so like how are you managing conflict,
Mm.
how are how are you receiving feedback, how are you managing your team, how are you giving feedback? So all of these sort of, I guess, more traditional coaching concepts, you can really get into those and start to, I think, develop real skills once you have that sense of alignment. And I think that's what a lot of coaching just skips over. Like, yeah, they might do values
Mhm.
work, but they're like, okay, like, let's hit the ground running. I'm like, you can't just learn influence from a textbook, right? You
Mhm.
can read anything, but you need to understand how to apply it. And when you get pushback, because people don't respond the way they respond in a textbook, right?
Yeah.
Like anyone that's been in a relationship with their partner, maybe you've had counseling or you've read a book on how to communicate, and you go, okay, well, I'm going to say this, and then they don't respond back the way they're meant to respond back. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, wait, I'm stuck now. Like, that wasn't how it was meant to go. It's like, but like, that's why you learn the principles, but to really apply them,
Mm.
like, you've got to really know yourself and what you want and why you're doing it.
Yes, the principles. That is what we can go to when things become chaotic. I
Correct.
always connected things to music, and as a musician, the principles are like the foundational scales, the specific ways that I have alignment in my body to play with a high level of
Yeah.
technique, even if I'm under pressure. It's those principles that I always come back to and that give me a sense of groundedness and the ability to be improvisatory in any
Yes,
situation.
yes, yes,
And
exactly.
yeah, so
Ex-
then you are then able to give them the skills, the foundational principle skills to improv with their boss, with their
Correct.
spouse. They
So
can
they
then
get the
apply it to anywhere, right?
Correct. And they get the foundation, they get the
Yeah.
skills, and then they start learning more about themselves and how to apply them when they're tested. And that's the resilience part,
Yeah.
right? The resilience is built through the repetition and the challenge. It's
Hmm.
like I love the analogy of music, of course. Like I studied music growing up. I was never a
Yeah.
professional. But yeah, you need to learn the scales in order to be able to
Hmm.
play. And then if you're really good like you are, you can improvise. I was never that good. It's also like being an athlete,
Yeah.
right? Like you do drills, you train. You don't learn how to play a game. You learn how
Mhm.
to, let's say it's basketball, use the ball, right? Like shoot, hoop, whatever. I never played
Yeah.
basketball, but like you learn all of these like techniques, like, and then you take those techniques and skills to the game, and then you come up with a game plan. And the game plan can shift every game, right? But the
Yeah.
skills and techniques are the same.
Exactly. And that's why I love your book so much. I read it in one sitting because it
Oh,
was so captivating. And what I found, like with this grand overview essentially of reading it in one sitting, is that you go deep on the principles. And then in your programs, you can start applying it and giving them the game plan. Is that kind of how it works, or how would you describe it?
that's right. So, like, if you were to do one-on-one coaching with me, we'd be much more sort of responsive and reactive to stuff that was
Uh-huh.
going on. So we can really troubleshoot live. Like, all right, like we obviously I work on the alignment piece and that can take a while, but we're then starting to like do live, like, okay, how are we going to change that? How did you approach that? Okay, let's see how you wrote that. Okay, how can we write it differently? Here's the framework for addressing that situation. So it can, it's much more sort of live in situ kind of stuff, which is what coaching should be.
Yeah.
But in my online program, it's kind of unique because it takes all of those like coaching principles, and obviously it takes the foundational work, but then it sort of gives you the techniques and the behavioral kind of experiments for you to go and do in work, come back, reflect, revise, do again. So you get that kind of benefit of working with a one-on-one coach, but obviously like for a fraction of the cost, and it can be more
Hmm.
self-paced. So yeah, that's exactly what you get out of coaching
I
with me.
love that. Yeah. And I am going to encourage every single person listening to this right now to go and buy this book. It is short, it is impactful, and what is it? It's just like $9.99,
Nine, yes,
9.97.
99. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
So go
Mhm.
do that right now. Do yourself a favor, do this. Because one of the things I figured out, or not figured out, but read the other day, is the number one reason why people don't achieve their New Year's resolutions or their New Year's goals is burnout. And
Interesting. I haven't even read that stat. That's a great stat. I
I'll
mean,
I'll
not
send
great, but
I'll
it's good
send
to
you the
know. Yeah.
article. Yeah, I'll send you
Yeah.
the article. You'll find it fascinating.
Mm.
But anyhow, it is a new year. Like this episode is going out January 27th. We're just barely into 2025. And the person listening, you probably have a lot of goals. You probably have these big ambitions. Maybe you set Q1 goals, Q2. You have it all organized, mapped out, and this is your ideal scenario. Now, life is going to happen. Crazy things are going to happen, and you might become burned out. But there is absolutely a way where burnout does not have to be the thing that takes you away from your goals. In fact, your stress can be the thing that helps you bring toward your goals. And that's actually something that you speak so beautifully on, Madeline, is how stress can be a factor for success. Like,
Yeah.
why can stress actually be a good thing? Tell me more.
I mean, stress is a good thing because stress is what challenges us, right? It
Mm,
takes us out of our comfort zone and pushes us into the growth zone. Now, sometimes we might not want to be in the growth zone. We just want to be like happy over here. But like
yes.
sometimes, particularly in the workplace, you don't have the option, right? Like you can't control the bigger picture. So the stress can be invigorating. It can be motivating. And it's definitely where we can like accelerate our growth. The issue is that stress, we can't constantly live in a state of stress. I mean, there's so many studies to show how negatively that impacts the body, the mind. We all know that. So it's about understanding the stress cycle and how you can contribute to it positively and negatively. So
Mm,
negatively would be the way I was contributing to it, which is when I was like defining myself on my role, worried about all like what people might think of me if I didn't want to do it anymore, like concerned about other people's opinion. There's all these ways we contribute to stress in our life. And I would say that's like the unexamined life. If you don't
Mm.
really question your why and really don't examine yourself, you will not really be able to manage stress. That's my controversial opinion.
Mm.
I just said that. I didn't say it like that in my book, but I think that's true. I think stress will consume you, and consume stress, it leads to burnout. So the way to manage
Mhm.
it is obviously through finding a greater sense of alignment, purpose, and doing things that bring out the best in you. Understanding your path, your goals, that helps you. Just say you've worked out sort of where you want to go and why. You might not be there yet,
Mhm.
but if you constantly have your eye on the prize and are looking at the ways that you can develop and grow, those challenges become growths, right? Growth
Yeah.
areas, right? And you can, if you have a bad day at work or you don't like your current work environment, you can manage that better by knowing that nothing is permanent and this is all part of your greater plan,
Yeah.
right? So, yeah.
Yes. Asking the why for each piece of information you get. So,
Yeah.
an emotion, a symptom of burnout, any of those things are just simply pieces of information. And if we don't
Yeah.
question them, then we can't get ahead.
Yeah.
That is, questioning it is actually the way to use it for your advantage. So, I love that you highlight that.
And that is a beautiful way of putting it. It's all information. It's all our own data, right? And what
Mm-hmm.
we do with it is what's important.
Yeah.
If we fall too much into like, why me? This is so hard, so bad. I can't
Mm-hmm.
get anywhere. That doesn't help. If we don't set healthy boundaries, or we don't manage conflict, or we don't say, you know what, this is not going to be good for me, and I need to, it's not just about accepting bad stuff, right? It's about being proactive in your life, but it's about you. I always say, like in my book and otherwise, like you're the main character in your story,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like your career, you need to give it main character energy, right? Like it's not happening to you, you are creating your story.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Main character energy, it's not happening to you, it's happening for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's for you. Like, what are the trials and tribulations that you are receiving in
Mm-hmm.
order to get to where you want to go? But work out where you want to go.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Ah, I knew this conversation would be amazing. And I always love to end episodes these days, anyhow, with a specific question. What does a day in the life of Madeline look like these days?
I mean, I'm only really 6 months into running this full time. I started it July. Like, I had no other work from July, right? So,
Yeah.
last year. So, I would not say that this is how I want my days to be moving forward forever. But right now, again, nothing tests you more than becoming an entrepreneur, right? When you
Oh,
put everything
yeah.
on the line. So, right now, I mean, I have clients. I have a handful, well, more than a handful. I have several private clients, but a lot of my zone of genius and the things, my values, the things that I like to do is communicate and create and be
Mm,
consistent. Like they were my 3 C's, right? And be of service, right? I have 10 values. I always narrow it down to 5, and then just sort of like a top 3.
yeah.
So what that means for me is that I do a lot of reading. I'd love to be doing more. I need to be doing more reading to keep my brain fresh and up to date with
Hmm.
ideas, and then integrating those ideas into the stuff I create. So whether it's my
Yeah.
short videos, whether it's like a blog post, whether it's my online program, whether it's something I want to share with my client, I'm constantly thinking, sort of ruminating, percolating, and then finding ways to get that out into the world in a sort of creative way that's going to land and be helpful to people. So
Mm,
my days are pretty full at my desk. I do manage to get outside every day. I see leadership as quite holistic, right? Like you need the
hmm.
mental, physical, and emotional health to thrive. So I've always exercised. I was a dancer growing up, so I've moved my body every day. That's really important to me. And I try and like tap out and step away from my desk and spend
Yeah.
time with like friends and family as well. But that's, it's not super balanced in terms of like the work hours at the moment, but I'm still in the building period, right? Like
Yeah.
I think the reason we do this is to have more free time in the future, but right now I'm very much in the like grind, get it out,
Mm,
build, but I love it. It makes me feel very fulfilled.
yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting that you are so creative with your days. You don't have a necessarily a set routine or schedule because you're building towards the freedom that you're looking for, the freedom of time
Right.
and money and relationship and what's
And
the
for
fourth one?
me,
Yeah,
yeah, time, money, relationship, health.
something
um,
like that. Yes.
Yeah. For me, like the whole reason I wanted to do this was to create membership platforms and online content and online materials so that I'm free to do more of the work I want to do, which is
Yeah.
speak and write. So, you know, if I can develop an infrastructure that does bring in forms of passive income, I can then be free to explore some more of my ideas and, you know, maybe be more creative in my writing, maybe speak to different types of people. So that's, you know, that's my goal. But right now, yeah, I'm building that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you will get there. When you continue working with the alignment, the influence, the resilience, you will get there. And if you design each part of your day, each part of your actions, every decision with these values, then you're on your
Yes,
way. Yeah. Then you can trust
exactly.
it.
That's
Amazing.
right. 100%. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, Madeline, where can people find you? What is the absolute best way to contact you?
I have a website, coachingwithmadeline.com. I'm also on Instagram at Madeline Miller Coaching. I'm also on LinkedIn at, I guess, Madeline Miller. I don't even know how, I guess I'm just me on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, they're the main places you can find me. That's where I'm most
perfect.
active.
Okay, well, I'll make sure that those links are in the description box as well as the link to your book. And I cannot wait to hear if people find you, when they find you. And yeah, thank you for the most
Thank you
delightful
so
hour of my day, or 36 minutes is where we're at. So
much.
thank you so
Power.
much, Madeline,
Thank
for your
you.
time and sharing your heart.
Thank, that
Thank you.
was lovely. Thank you, Ina.